February 11th, 1945. Northern Burma. The jungle steamed under the afternoon sun, every leaf trembling with heat. Japanese soldiers of the 56th Division lounged near a makeshift ammunition depot carved into a clearing. Piles of mortar shells and wooden crates sat under tarpaulins, and the air was heavy with the smell of oil and sweat. Corporal Kenji Sato leaned against a tree, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. His comrades were teasing a Burmese guide who had just delivered a batch of strange-looking tubes. Each was about 2 feet long, wrapped in green bamboo, sealed with wax at both ends. "American toys," someone muttered. "Maybe chopsticks for their big noses." The men laughed. The guide said nothing. He placed the bundle down and hurried away, vanishing into the thick wall of vines. Sergeant Nakamura kicked one of the tubes with his boot. It rolled over with a dull thud. "Bamboo bombs, huh?" he said mockingly. "The British think we'll run from bamboo now?" The others howled with laughter. Overhead, a distant drone echoed through the jungle canopy. An Allied plane, perhaps, but it was far off, harmless. The soldiers ignored it, passing a canteen between them, their jokes growing louder. A mile away, deep in the shadows of the forest, a small team of Allied guerrillas, part of the Office of Strategic Services, fighting alongside Kachin scouts, listened to the laughter through binoculars. Lieutenant Marcus Reed crouched beside a rock, sweat streaking down his neck, a faint grin crossing his face. "They're laughing already," he whispered. "Good, let them." In the center of the clearing, one of the bamboo tubes gave a faint pop. The soldiers didn't notice at first, until a hiss followed, then another. The wax seal burst, releasing a thin trail of gray smoke. Corporal Sato frowned. "What the hell?" The explosion came like a thunderclap. The bamboo tube split open, spraying burning gel across the crates. A dozen sparks ignited at once, each one a miniature inferno. Within seconds, the entire depot erupted in orange fireballs. "Fire! Fire!" Nakamura screamed, scrambling to pull open a crate of ammunition. But it was too late. The jungle floor became a wall of flame. Explosions leapt from one pile to another, the air thick with smoke and screaming metal. The laughter was gone now, replaced by chaos, heat, and terror. The men dove into ditches as shrapnel tore through the air. The bamboo bombs, once a joke, were devouring the camp. From his vantage point, Lieutenant Reed watched through binoculars. His voice was calm. "Looks like the bamboo worked." Beside him, the Kachin guide smiled faintly. "Japanese. Don't laugh now." The sky glowed red above the burning treetops as the jungle consumed itself. Somewhere in the distance, a monkey screamed, an eerie echo of the laughter that had begun it all. Weeks earlier, January 1945, inside a humid Allied field workshop near Imphal, India. The air was filled with the smell of kerosene and charred metal. Makeshift tables were covered with bamboo stalks, jerry cans, and old ration tins. Here, among engineers and guerrilla tacticians, the strange idea that would terrify Japanese troops was first born. Captain Harold "Mac" McIntyre of the British Special Operations Executive leaned over a cluttered workbench, holding a length of bamboo up to the light. Its inner walls gleamed with resin. "It's natural, waterproof, strong," he muttered, "and every inch of Burma has it." Beside him, a young American ordnance officer, Lieutenant Marcus Reed, scribbled notes. "The problem's not getting explosives in," he said. "It's making sure it looks harmless long enough to get close." That was the genius of the plan. Instead of steel casings, which Japanese sentries would immediately confiscate, the team would use bamboo, ordinary, local, and invisible among the daily clutter of jungle life. McIntyre tapped a finger on the workbench. "We pack it with phosphorus and thermite gel. Add a wax seal to keep it dry. Once the fuse burns through." He mimed an explosion with his hands. "The entire thing goes off like a fuel drum." The Kachin scouts, who knew every trail and village between Imphal and Myitkyina, were the next piece of the plan. They would carry these bamboo tubes under rice sacks, placing them inside Japanese supply depots, truck stops, and even under fuel barrels. But there was one problem. No one believed it would work. "Bamboo bombs?" one officer scoffed during a briefing. "You're telling me we'll scare the Imperial Army with gardening supplies?" McIntyre had only smiled. "That's the point. They won't be scared until it's too late." Days turned into nights of relentless testing. The first prototypes burned too quickly, exploding before the saboteurs could escape. The second batch barely ignited. Then, after dozens of attempts, Reed's adjustment, mixing powdered aluminum with rubber adhesive, produced a perfect delayed ignition. In the dim light of a single lantern, the final test went off. A hollow thud, a hiss, and then an eruption of orange fire that scorched the palm trees 20 yards away. Reed grinned through the smoke. "She breathes fire." McIntyre nodded. "Now let's see if the Japanese can laugh at that." By February, Kachin scouts carried hundreds of these makeshift bombs through the mountains, disguised as trade goods. To the Japanese, they looked like bundles of harmless bamboo until the moment they exploded inside their own supply lines. And as Allied intelligence soon learned, the effect wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Rumors spread among Japanese ranks about haunted bamboo and cursed forests. Soldiers grew jumpy, refusing to store crates near any unfamiliar stalks. The jungle itself had become a weapon. March 3, 1945. Somewhere along the Ledo Road, Burma. Rain hammered the jungle in silver sheets, turning the narrow trail into a river of mud. A Japanese truck convoy rumbled through the storm, engines growling, tires slipping on the slick ground. Each vehicle carried crates of artillery shells and drums of aviation fuel bound for Myitkyina. Private Tanaka sat in the back of the lead truck, soaked to the bone. He stared out at the walls of bamboo flashing by in the headlights. Ever since the attack on the depot last month, whispers had spread like fungus in the ranks. Soldiers spoke of the burning stalks, of bamboo that hissed, spat smoke, and swallowed entire camps in fire. Superstition had taken root in the Imperial Army. Men kicked at bamboo stalks as they passed, spat curses into the jungle, and avoided sleeping near trees. But tonight, under pounding rain, they felt safer. Fire couldn't burn in this. Halfway up the slope, the convoy stopped. The lead truck's headlights caught something ahead, fallen bamboo blocking the road. The driver and Tanaka jumped out, sloshing through the mud to clear it. The stalks were hollow, bound together with rope. "From the rain," said the driver. "Nothing dangerous." Tanaka nodded, though his stomach twisted. He grabbed one of the bamboo poles. It was heavier than it should have been. Then he heard it, a faint sizzle beneath the rain. He dropped the bamboo just as it burst open in white flame. In seconds, the road became a wall of fire. Fuel drums exploded one after another like thunder rolling through the valley. Trucks flipped, men screamed, and the jungle itself seemed to catch fire. From a ridge above, Lieutenant Reed watched through rain-specked binoculars. The OSS team had been waiting for that convoy for 2 days. The moment the first explosion echoed up the valley, the Kachin scouts around him broke into quiet laughter. "They're burning their own road," one whispered. Reed's face was expressionless, but his voice carried a quiet awe. "The bamboo does the talking for us." Below, chaos reigned. The Japanese commander tried to rally his men, shouting for extinguishers, but the thermite gel was merciless. It clung to everything. Even rain couldn't kill it. Black smoke billowed upward, choking the night sky. Hours later, when the fires finally died, nothing remained but twisted metal and the charred outlines of trucks. Dozens of soldiers were missing, and the road itself, vital to Japan's supply network, was impassable. Word of the attack spread fast. In Rangoon, officers dismissed it as accidental fire. But the survivors knew what they had seen: bamboo that exploded, bamboo that burned even in rain. And somewhere deep in the Allied lines, the men who invented it celebrated with a tin of coffee and a laugh that sounded a lot like revenge. Late March 1945. The Japanese High Command in Rangoon was in turmoil. Reports kept arriving from across Burma, supply dumps destroyed, convoys lost, and men claiming that the jungle itself was alive with fire. Colonel Masaru Ishida spread the dispatches across his desk. The handwriting varied, some neat, others shaking and smudged, but the stories were the same. Mysterious explosions, bamboo fragments found at every blast site, ammunition depots vanishing overnight. He dismissed his aides and lit a cigarette, staring at the maps on his wall. It made no sense. No air raids, no artillery, no trace of Allied forces, just bamboo. Ishida exhaled slowly. "The enemy uses ghosts now," he muttered. But the truth was far from supernatural. In the mountains north of Lashio, OSS teams and Kachin saboteurs had refined their craft. They built new variants, some with phosphorus, others with time-delay fuses hidden under rice baskets or disguised inside canteens. Every explosion tore another hole in Japan's crumbling supply web. The effect rippled through morale. Patrols refused to move through dense groves. Mechanics refused to repair trucks near bamboo fences. Even seasoned officers started burning roadside vegetation out of fear. By April, the Japanese lines were starving, not just for fuel and munitions, but for trust. Soldiers no longer trusted their own surroundings. In one small outpost near Mektila, a platoon commander named Lieutenant Araki ordered his men to clear a patch of bamboo near the ammunition tents. He'd heard the stories and didn't want any ghost stalks nearby. They hacked for hours under the sun, sweat and mud mixing into streaks on their faces. One soldier, exhausted, tossed his machete aside and leaned against a fresh stalk. He heard a faint crack. "Sir, this one's leaking," he said. Araki turned, brow furrowed. The stalk's end was sealed with wax. His mouth went dry. "Run!" he screamed. The explosion was deafening. The fire consumed everything: the tents, the ammo, the men. When the smoke cleared, nothing was left but ash and fragments of bamboo charred black as coal. From a nearby ridge, villagers watched in silence. To them, it looked as if the jungle had struck back after years of occupation. Weeks later, Allied reconnaissance pilots flying over central Burma saw the damage firsthand: long trails of scorched forest and blackened roads winding like scars through the hills. One pilot radioed, "Looks like the Earth's been burning itself." By then, the Japanese retreat had already begun. Every outpost lost to bamboo fire forced another withdrawal, another abandoned depot. The Allies advanced behind a line of invisible saboteurs, and in every destroyed camp they found the same thing: melted metal, scorched ration tins, and fragments of bamboo still smoldering in the dirt. The empire that had once boasted of conquering Asia was now afraid of its own forests. May 1945. The monsoon rains had returned, drowning the Burmese hills in mist. The war in the Pacific was shifting. Japan was losing ground across every front. Yet in the shadowed valleys of northern Burma, the strangest battle of all was still unfolding, between superstition and survival. At dawn, Lieutenant Marcus Reed sat under a torn canvas shelter, his uniform soaked through. Around him, Kachin scouts cleaned their rifles, smoke from a small fire curling into the gray sky. From his satchel, Reed pulled out a letter from headquarters, a commendation for extraordinary field innovation. He smiled faintly. "Captain McIntyre would have liked that," he said quietly. The Kachin leader beside him, an older man named Nao Kum, grinned. "Bamboo wins the war," he said in broken English. Reed nodded. "It scared them more than bullets ever could." Across the ridge, they could see columns of black smoke rising again. Another Japanese fuel dump gone. The explosions had become routine, like punctuation marks in the retreating empire's downfall. But what Reed didn't yet know was how far the legend had spread. In the towns still held by Japanese forces, fear had turned into ritual. Soldiers refused to walk near stacked bamboo. They broke stalks with bayonets before carrying them into camp. Some units even held nightly prayers to ward off forest demons. One sergeant, writing in his diary before the final Allied push into Burma, described it this way: "We once feared planes, tanks, and guns. Now we fear the sound of bamboo cracking in the wind." The psychological victory was complete. The Allies didn't just destroy supply lines, they infected the enemy's imagination. Weeks later, Reed's team received word. Japanese command was abandoning major routes and falling back toward Thailand. The sabotage campaign had achieved its purpose. He and his men were ordered to stand down and regroup in Imphal. Before leaving, Reed walked through the clearing where it had all started, the site of that first explosion back in February. Charred trees jutted from the ground like blackened spears, the earth still scarred by flame. He knelt and picked up a fragment of bamboo, scorched and cracked, but still faintly green inside. Nature had turned into weaponry. Simplicity had become strategy. He turned to his scouts. "This little thing," he said, holding it up, "did more than 100 bombs ever could." Na Kum smiled. "Because it belonged to the jungle." As Allied troops advanced, the story of the bamboo bombs spread among them like legend, told in mess tents, whispered in airfields, repeated by soldiers who'd never even seen Burma. They spoke of how the jungle had turned against the invaders, how simple stalks of grass became fire and fear, and how laughter, once echoing through those green canopies, had vanished into silence and smoke. August 1945. News of Japan's surrender reached the camps. Reed was sitting alone, sharpening his knife, when the message came through the radio. He didn't cheer. He simply looked toward the forest. The rain was falling again, soft, steady, and endless. The war was over. But in Burma it hadn't ended with tanks or bombers. It had ended with bamboo and the fear it left behind. The bamboo bombs of Burma were never mass-produced, never written into grand military histories, yet they embodied the very essence of World War II ingenuity, turning nature itself into a silent ally. What began as laughter among Japanese soldiers became terror in their ranks, proving that in war it's not always size or strength that wins, but creativity, courage, and the will to adapt. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten innovations and untold tactics that shaped World War II, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might just reveal how a single wild idea changed the entire course of the war.